Well, thank you, Ms. Crowner, for asking me to speak today. Before I start, I just want to thank Annalise Browse for being a harsh critic, but a helpful one. I have structured this speech under 3 headings. I first want to share a little bit about my background. Then I want to talk about how I have negotiated my national identity. And then I want to end on some things I want us to keep in mind as we move into International Weekend. All right, I was born in the capital city of Nicaragua in a time when, for good historical reasons, anti-American sentiments were running high amongst most sectors of the population. I grew up happy. I went to a bilingual preschool called Kitty Stop, and then to a Catholic school for the next 13 years. Drastic change. A regular school day for me started at 4:40 a.m. when I had to wake up and get ready to take the 5:30 a.m. bus. School started at 6:45 and then it ended at 12:30. I would then take the bus back home, do my homework really fast, eat lunch with my sisters, and then that was it. I was free. Actually free to do whatever I wanted. Most days I would spend the whole afternoon playing soccer with the kids in my block. Other days I would spend it riding a bike with my 2 friends from school. My 2 best friends from school, not my only friends from school. I did those things not for the sake of exercise, but just to do something. My friends and I would bike all afternoon to see if we could ride without hands, or just to go really fast on a slope, but more often than not just to talk and have a laugh. There wasn't an agenda to those afternoons. In fact, they were pretty pointless. But that's why I remember them with such fondness. I wasn't preparing for anything. I was just having fun. I didn't play a sport growing up. I tried to play the guitar, but I was so bad, my teacher one day just outright stopped coming to my house. I later found out that he had moved to Canada, which I fear might have something to do with how bad I was at the guitar. My only extracurricular activity growing up was volunteering at an under-resourced school, teaching Spanish and math, but that was only on Fridays. It was only until my senior year that I was forced to branch out, and I chose dance. I did really well in school, and I got a scholarship from the Jesuits to study at a local university. I wanted to study engineering. I was really good at math, or so I thought, and I was even better at chemistry. Plus, it seemed like the most practical thing to do in a country like Nicaragua. All the best jobs were for engineers. I was set on engineering, but I wasn't sold on the idea of studying in Nicaragua. I decided to apply to something called a United World College. I got the scholarship, and I was given the choice of going to a school in Costa Rica, India, and Hong Kong. I chose Hong Kong. There, I studied the International Baccalaureate, so an extra 2 years of high school, which was fine because I was 16, quite young for my year when I graduated high school in Nicaragua. Going to a boarding school in Hong Kong taught me many things, obviously. Even before I got to Hong Kong, I was told that Chinese culture held in high esteem the notion that one should only speak when you can improve silence. Though I fail at this virtually every time I open my mouth, it is something that has stuck with me. In Hong Kong, it was the first time I was taking all my classes in English, and I found it hard, but I ended up loving it. I was meeting people from literally all over the world, 86 countries represented among 250 students. My roommates were from Hong Kong, Kenya, Tajikistan, China. It was a very diverse environment. My parents couldn't afford to fly me back home for Christmas break, so I didn't go home for a year. When I went back a very different man in many ways. But I want to highlight 2 such ways. The first is that I now find myself much more interested in literature than I'd ever been. My Spanish teacher at my school gave me a book by Jorge Luis Borges to read over Christmas break. This should not come as a surprise to my students, or really anyone who knows me. Conversations with me usually go, "Hi, my name is Pedro. I love Borges." I was hooked, and today there are only a few things that I value more than my engagement with literature. One of the many things I've learned from Borges is precisely how to negotiate my national identity. I read his essay on so-called Argentine literature, so troubling for my students, which ended with the following sentence: "We cannot confine ourselves to what is Argentine in order to be Argentine, because either it is our inevitable destiny to be Argentine, in which case we will be Argentine, whatever we do, or being Argentine is a mere affectation, a mask." This astonishing remark by Borges completely rid me from any concern with my national identity. I figured I will forever be Nicaraguan, even if I act nothing like my countrymen. The other way in which I changed, or I went back home a changed person, was that in Nicaragua it was hard for me to think of myself as anything but straight. In my new school, with my aggressively open-minded friends and teachers, I could begin to explore my sexual and emotional preferences in an environment that was safe. The whole idea that you could explore such a thing was completely foreign to me. I did, and that exploration yielded the gay man which I'm happy and proud to be today. Two things, literature and sexuality, that I came to see in a completely different light only when I left home. This might speak more to the repressive nature of the society I grew up in, but I also think that there's something to be said for living away from home, for going away from your house, for your parents, your neighbors, your childhood friends, as it allows you to explore areas of yourself that you didn't know existed. You will feel this way, I think, when you go to college, if you don't already. In some strange turn of fate, I ended up at a predominantly WASPy fratty college. When I was deciding where to go, my friends all told me I should go to Brown, which seemed to fit my profile a lot better. I decided to go to Dartmouth instead, partly because the lady that read my application sent me an email saying that she had really liked it, partly because they offer a class on Borges. Not a joke. And partly because I was intrigued by the idea of challenging myself by being in an environment that shared few of my values and concerns. I had read and was completely enthralled by a few lines by the Portuguese poet Fernando Pessoa. They go as such: "I don't trust masters who can't be down to earth. For me, they're like those eccentric poets who can't write like anyone else. I accept that they're eccentric, but I would like them to show me that it's because they're superior to the norm rather than incapable of it." I took this to mean, go forth, Pedro, join a frat. Do everything that the majority of kids here do and excel at it. And so I did. Most of my time at Dartmouth can be summed up by those 4 lines. But then it started to dawn on me, slowly but surely, that, to name but one thing, fraternities at my school and all other schools were contributing, consciously or unconsciously, to the horrifying number of sexual assault victims across America. I became aware that the sexes civilize each other, and that to separate them is to distort reality for the worse. Not to mention that fraternities and sororities help to foster the idea that the male-female binary is all that exists or should exist, which is decidedly not the case. Another experience I had in college that may be attributed to the Pessoa quote is that all my best friends from college are American. This is strikingly different to the experience all my Nicaraguan friends studying at American colleges had. All of them ended up with a group of friends that consisted mostly of Latin Americans and a few other international students here and there. I have also noticed that for me, for one reason or another, English has become the language in which I do most of my thinking and writing. This, again, is not the case with my Nicaraguan friends who have spent as much time in the US as I have. There are many things about the United States that I've been very open to. The language, the people, the humor. And yet, there are many others to which I remain resistant. The obsession with work, money, guns, peanut butter. I had to include some jokes here and there. I recall something that Nabokov, who's one of my favorite writers, once said about feeling displaced in one's surroundings. He says something to the effect of, "I am made to feel alienated, unfamiliar by everything and always. It's my job, it's my default state, it's my life." He was speaking in French for a French audience, and the word he used was dépaysé, which literally sort of means something like removed from one's country. For Nabokov, this feeling of displacement or alienation was understandably tragic. The Bolshevik Revolution had ripped him from his house, from his home, and somewhat indirectly killed his father. For me, though I often feel unfamiliar, foreign, this is not a tragic feeling. For example, as a feminist, I loathe the sexism, mild or overt, that runs rampant in Nicaraguan society, and to a lesser extent here in the US. But I know full well that I'm not stuck here, or really anywhere. I'm much more free than Nabokov was. What I'm trying to say is, though I can't help but feel alienated by many aspects of both Nicaraguan and American cultures, though neither Nicaragua nor America feel entirely like home, I feel as though I'm able to happily exist in either place. Finally, as we go into International Weekend, I want to share some of my thoughts regarding what I think should be the focus of this weekend. Obviously, I shouldn't really say this, but I speak for no one but myself. I believe quite strongly that this International Weekend should be an opportunity to explore our differences, not our similarities. The political use of highlighting our similarities has been grossly exaggerated. In fact, it has been used time and again to further oppress people that were in the minority. When Lily Walker read that poem entitled Dear Straight People and called straight people out, I heard people say that we shouldn't alienate straight people. Instead, we should be emphasizing the ways in which we're similar. That's all very well, but we are different. And we are treated differently. And this is perhaps the most important thing. Inequality across the board is our political and social reality, and it has been for a long time. As has been made painfully made evident yet again by the recent murders of black men, women, and children late last year, to name but one tragic set of events. So I would like us to stop telling black people, say, or many other peoples, that we're similar when we're not treated as equals. And even then, we will remain different, as we should be. I argue that it takes more humanity to treat someone that is different as your equal, rather than treat someone that is similar to you as your equal. Negotiating our differences, truly embracing diversity, is hard, and the market will try to bully us into not doing so. But we have to. As a school and as a country, we have to live with our differences. I hope it is clear by now that when I talk about differences, I'm not talking about the superficial type of difference that is a function of the clothes you wear and that the market aggressively tries to sell to you. When I speak of difference, I'm speaking of something much more profound. I'm talking about forms of life. I'm talking about ways of experiencing the world. It is not up to me to tell you what are, say, black experiences or gay experiences. But I want us to be open to the possibility that these experiences, black, gay, and others, are inherently different from white experiences. I think at some point in time, just to give an example, students, you will feel the pressure to attend an Ivy League school. But the obvious fact is, not all of you will, and at the risk of sounding really hypocritical, not all of you should want to go. I know for a fact that some of my black friends regret going to Dartmouth, and they wish they had gone to a historically black college, where it's likely they would have had more support. In a letter to his nephew, James Baldwin, the great African-American writer, said, "Please try to be clear, James, about the reality which lies behind the words acceptance and integration. There is no reason for you to try to become like white people, and there is no basis whatever for their impertinent assumption that they must accept you." What interested Baldwin and what interests me is the question of how do we preserve, say, black ways of experiencing the world or gay forms of life? How do we protect those forms of life against the overwhelmingly wide backdrop of seemingly acceptable forms of life? Which is to really ask, how do we truly embrace difference? Difference seems to be about the only essential thing in the world. Difference is the very stuff we're made of. Since at least Freud, we have known that the self, despite appearances, is not coherent or static. It is actually a volatile, intricate field of forces that are always, by definition, at odds with each other. Think about it this way. If each of us were tiny countries, conflict negotiation would be our national sports. We do this constantly internally, but we seem reluctant to do so in the external world. So I say, let's do, in the physical world, what our psyches do routinely. Let's embrace coexistence rather than consensus. To end, I would like to offer yet another place where difference is essential. That place is language. The work of Ferdinand de Saussure helped create the basis for all modern inquiry into language. One of Saussure's fundamental contributions to linguistics is the idea that meaning is a play of difference. Boat, B-O-A-T, signifies boat, the thing, because it doesn't signify beat, or bat, or bet. Our society is like language, a system of differences, which is another way of saying that we're all connected. So, if I want you to recall one thing from this speech, is the following. Everything that is truly meaningful arises out of difference. For what they're worth, these are my thoughts as we go into International Weekend. Thank you.